Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about the Pac-12 and a huge win for Oregon State and Washington State over there. But now let's talk some transfer portal. But before we jump into that, I do want to remind you all we get tons of questions and comments throughout the show. And the best way for you all to see your questions on the screen, we can have a fun back and forth, or you can ask something that you were wondering about what I'm talking about in the segment. You can use the link at the bottom of the screen, GSMCPodcast.net. It's a huge help not only to us here at the network, but to you all. You get to watch the show, see your name on the screen, see your question on the screen, so a little bit of fun for all of us. But let's jump into the transfer portal. There has been a lot of talk around the transfer portal as of late. Caden Proctor obviously made huge news last week when he decided he is likely going back to Alabama after transferring to Iowa from Alabama about 2 months ago. So obviously, this has been a big topic of conversation, and there was a very interesting piece, or a very interesting segment on Late Kick with Josh Pate, where he was talking about the Caden Proctor situation and kind of what's in store for the April transfer portal. And I'll be honest, it's not great. I'll put it that way. If you are someone that is worried about the transfer portal, if you see it as this terrifying entity that is super dangerous to the sport of college football, you might want to cover your ears, because this will not subside that belief. I'll be totally honest with you. So this story is very interesting for a number of reasons. There are tons of different directions we could go with it, but let's start with what actually was said by Josh Pate on his story. He was talking to someone that is very much in the know around college football. Josh Pate has tons of sources and people within programs or people around programs that give him very good intel. And if anyone in here or anyone watching this is a part of that type of world and wants to talk to me, please, I'm more than welcome to talk. But Josh Pate was talking to one of these guys, and they were talking about the transfer portal and kind of what is around the corner for the post-spring opening that everyone can go into. And he essentially said that there is a major program in college football that has an entire position group, not necessarily an entire, but a good portion of a position group that coach has a full understanding will not be on the team after spring. They know that they are 1 foot out the door. They know that they're going to jump in the portal essentially on April 15th, right when it opens. So that's already a crazy thing to know. It's crazy that these kids have made up their minds. We're, a couple of weeks into spring practice, but a couple of kids, obviously, at this particular program have already made up their minds and are moving on elsewhere. He also said, which might be the crazier of the two statements, that not only do they know that certain guys are leaving, but they know which guys they are going to backfill with after these guys leave. They know which guys are going to come in as replacements for the ones leaving. And those guys happen to be on other rosters right now. So this obviously opens a full can of worms. And this is absolutely insane. It's truly something that when the transfer portal was introduced, there was all this talk about the, slippery slope we were going down and all of the things that could happen throughout this time that would be dangerous to the sport, that would be dangerous to the kids. And a lot of it I believed. A lot of it I was fully on board with. I totally understood where people were coming from. There were going to be kids that made bad decisions and were unhappy at the place they transferred to, and it's happened already. There were going to be kids that were taken advantage of and promised things that were not going to be followed through on, and that has happened. So all of this stuff I was on board with. This is not necessarily something I ever saw coming. There was never part of me that thought an entire position group can leave a team, and before those guys even sign the papers to enter the transfer portal, they will know who's coming in to replace those players. It's not necessarily something that I thought was going to happen. I thought that the transfer portal would find its level rather quickly, and we would be able to find some rules that actually make sense. But we've gone in the opposite direction. Obviously, the NCAA has not been looking too pretty the last couple of months. They've lost some court cases around NIL that essentially give them no power to do much of anything around their NIL rules because they violate antitrust laws, which is another thing we are definitely watching to see if that is something that they can get an antitrust exemption on or what happens there, but we'll keep you updated as that goes. And also, the transfer portal has kind of just been open up as free reign. Not kids can't go in whenever they want, but there are tons of stipulations that give kids a lot of autonomy in this situations. And personally, I'm not necessarily against player empowerment and player power in where they want to go. They should be able to make those decisions for themselves. But it is insane that a kid can be on his way to practice at Tennessee, let's say. This is a totally random team, but let's say he's on his practice to Tennessee. He's about to walk into Neyland Stadium, and he gets a call from someone at another school. I don't want to say any other school because I don't want to get anyone in trouble. Totally hypothetical, but he gets a call from a position coach at another school, and he says, hey, we'll offer you X amount if you want to come on over and start for us next year. All of that can happen without really any repercussions, and that money does not have to come to fruition, and that, again, cannot be really policed. It can't be, these people can't be punished is the best way to put it. I apologize, kind of lost my train of thought there for a second, but these people just essentially can do whatever they want. It's the Wild West of college football, where if you see a player you really want, you can go get that player, and you can lie and deceit to do it. And it's obviously a crazy moment. It's something that is going to send shockwaves across the sport over the next month. I think it's going to be something that might turn some fans away from the sport over the next month, because if it is made out to be what Josh Pate was talking about, that's not the end of it. It's not just this one school that has a position group that they're going to replace. It's going to be all over the country. And the teams that you think are going to benefit, the big dogs, they're going to benefit. The teams that you think are kind of the smaller dogs and are going to get taken advantage of, they'll get taken advantage of. This will go down exactly the way that you were expecting it to go down, and it'll really hurt the sport. At least in the short term, it'll really hurt the sport. I'll get to the long term here in a second, but the sport, since its inception, has been skewed. That's just kind of the way football works. There are certain guys in certain parts of the country that are more talented. There are certain financial abilities for schools that have put them at better footing than others. I think that has been a thing really since the inception of college football. It's just changed where the money has been throughout the years, but it's been skewed. But this changes that entire equation. It's no longer skewed towards the big time teams. It might be a little bit rigged towards the big time teams, and that's not necessarily to say there's a big conspiracy to make it rigged towards the big time teams, but the way the NCAA set up the transfer portal, the way they set up NIL was essentially, we're going to throw out these ideas, we're going to throw out these concepts, and have very little guidelines around them. And it's not that they didn't try. They obviously put together some type of rules, although that was a couple of months into the transfer portal in the NIL world. But they tried to put in some rules, and the rules fell flat. And it's because all of this has been happening for the last decade. All of the NIL stuff has been happening way longer than a decade, to be totally honest. I mean, it's been going on since at least Reggie Bush, but well before that. So people have been pushing for players to get paid. People have been pushing for player empowerment for a really long time. And the NCAA knew this, and the NCAA essentially sat there and just waited for the volcano to burst. They waited for the moment that they had to make action, which was other states coming in and making their own NIL rules. They then decided to jump into the fray. If they had jumped into the fray in 2015 or 2014 when the playoff was first introduced, I don't want to say that we wouldn't have any problems, because this sport definitely would have issues at its hand, but man, would we have a better grasp on just what's going on in our sport. I think there are tons of people that don't even know that there's a transfer portal window after spring and don't even know how crazy it might be. Josh Pate was saying it could be crazier than the December window, which is something that really should never happen, right? Players should go to a team, they should transfer to a team and go through spring workouts and not either immediately want to change paths or have some big time players, whether they're starting at their current place or could start somewhere else, jumping in April and only joining for the summer workout. So the fact that we are around the corner from a transfer portal window that could be the craziest that we've ever seen is something that I wasn't necessarily expecting this year. I wasn't necessarily expecting ever, especially in the April opening, because December felt like the time, right? December felt like the opening for all of these kids to make their decision, to find a new place to play, go through a full off season, and then be ready to roll in spring. Now it seems like kids are kind of open to whatever. They are very amenable to the circumstances that are around them, and these decisions can be made fairly quickly. So essentially, all of that to say, prepare yourself for April that a lot of us will not love. That a lot of us will be looking around college football and trying to find where college football went, where the parts of college football that we love so much, where all of those went, and when or if they will ever come back. I think that's something that is definitely possible and is definitely going to be very real over the next month. You will see a lot of people wanting to abandon the sport. You will see a lot of people angry and calling out the NCAA or calling out other teams for tampering, and there's not much really we can do, at least for right now. As April unfolds, it's gonna be upsetting. It's gonna be weird, and we're kind of just have to wait it out. We're gonna kind of just have to hunker down, let the storm pass, as it were, and hopefully, and I tend to think that this is already happening behind the scenes as coaches hear more and more about what's going to happen, but hopefully people start to step up. As we know, in pretty much anything, whether it's sports or society or whatever you want to talk about, something big needs to happen before genuine change comes, right? There needs to be an event that everyone can look at and say, that is bad for the sport. That is bad for the future of college football. That is bad for the kids. That is bad for essentially everyone involved. And it could very well be this April transfer portal where you see names you never even dreamed would be in the transfer portal jump in and find a new place to play. And I don't know the names. Caden Proctor will obviously be one of those names. There's been a couple other guys that have made their intentions known, but there are more coming. There are more that are hiding under the surface, and it's going to be some names that'll make your jaw drop. But after all of that, after the dust settles with all of this craziness and we get to a place where everyone can take a deep breath, hopefully the group that is, I'm going to call them the Nick Saban group, the group that are hopefully going to be kind of the future of college football and usher us into this new era of college football as smoothly as possible. I think it has to be former coaches. It has to be former players. It has to be people that not only are around the sport and understand the sport, but genuinely love the sport. I've talked about this what feels like a million times, but I'll do it a million and one. The people currently making decisions for the sport don't love the sport. It's really that simple. I wish it wasn't the case, but that's kind of just how it goes. That needs to change as quickly as possible, and I think this April could be that moment where it's not only Nick Saban in the picture, it is big coaches from all over the country, whether it's Bill Snyder hanging out and giving his sage wisdom, or any big-time coaches from the past that step up to the plate and show what they know about this sport and essentially give us an idea of not only where we are and how really broken this entire system is, but what is some ways to get out of it, and what's some ways to get out of it where you don't take the power back out of the players' hands, because there is a way forward where players can have that autonomy, have that power over the transfer portal, over NIL, and does not have a system that's entirely broken and they can just get contacted whenever they want and it's all over the place. We don't need to have that. But we need the right people steering the ship for that to happen. So Nick Saban has started this trend, I'll call it. More people need to join in, and they need to join in a very, very real way. We saw Nick Saban on Capitol Hill talking about this. I've been on record as saying I don't think necessarily that Congress is going to be the ones to come to the aid of college football, just because this is not necessarily the most pressing issue on their hands right now. But I do think there needs to be an entity that steps up. There needs to be a governing body that steps up, and whether it's developed by Nick Saban or developed by Greg Sankey or whoever it is, it needs to be someone that knows the sport, that loves the sport, that cares about the future of the sport and the players. Because as of right now, we think we're giving players power. We think we're giving them the ability to do what they want, and we are, but at the same time, we are putting them in just so much danger of getting taken advantage of losing part of what they loved about this sport. About it, it's an even slippery, a more slippery slope that we're going down, where kids no longer even think about the school. They no longer even think about academics, and that's already something that started to happen, but they don't even think about the environment or the people or the energy they feel when they're on that campus, which when I was going to college was a huge part of it. Going onto a campus and kind of just feeling how I felt. Did it feel like home when I was there? Was a huge part of it, and that's going to get lost in all of this. And I'm not saying that, kids aren't welcome to make the decision however they see fit, but kids are going to make the wrong decision. That's just the way it is, and you never want to see that happen, because then you see a college football career come to an end way quicker than it needs to. So obviously this is a very, very interesting time in the sport, and this next month is going to be absolutely wild. I will keep you updated with all of the players and the teams that are getting hit by this, but at the end of the day, my advice is essentially just strap in, wait it out. It's going to be very weird, but I think it's going to bring about needed change and eventually will lead to a healthier, better form of college football that actually, cares about you, gives players power, but doesn't set them up to fail. So it'll be really interesting to see all of this unfold. Obviously, I will keep you updated as more stuff happens here, but settle in, I guess, is the best way to end this segment. But we're going to take our second break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about J.J. McCarthy. There is some, I don't want to say confusion, but there are some people with some varying opinions about J.J. McCarthy, and I'm going to kind of split the middle, tell you what I think about him, and kind of give you an idea of where some people are right about him, where some of the haters are not so right about him. But stick with us, and we will be right back with that.